Welcome back, weavers. Right now I'm going to show you how to add raya. It's also known as shag. And I really like this. It has a really cool shaggy look to it, which I'll show you in a second. What I've done on my extra loom is preemptively started. So what that means is to do raya, you're going to have like pieces of thread, and in between you're going to have 2 rows of tabby. So if you noticed, I have my tabby, so it's over, under, over, under, over, under. You can see the pattern. So I'll have 2 rows of that. And then what you need to get ready are your pieces of thread. Now, I usually will make a lot, especially if I know that I'm going to have a chunk of raya happening. It's always better to have more, and then you can use the extra for another craft. So what I do is I'm going to use purple as my shag. And so I'll just wrap it around my hand. I kind of start by my pinky. And then I'll start to wrap it. Yeah. Oh, my yarn is falling. So I'll just do this much for now, since I'm just going to show you. So I wrap it, and then what I'm going to do is I'll cut it. Okay, and then I'll cut the top. You could also cut the bottom, but I always like to have longer than what I actually need. Depending on how shaggy or how long you want this shag to be, you want to make sure your pieces are long enough. And that's really the challenge. So I'll cut them pretty long, and then trim them if I need to not worry about it. So I have my tabby already woven, and I'm just going to use my beater and put those guys together. And so now I'm going to get one of my threads. So let me do a close-up so you guys can see this just a little bit better. So here is my shag. I'm going to start on the first 2 warps. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the shag over the warp. And then I'm going to put one tail through and in the middle. And I'm going to do the same with the other one. Put that tail into the middle. And then I kind of tug it and I'll bring it down. Now, as you can see, when I pull, the warp threads start to warp. They start to get really skinny. You don't want that. You want them to stay normal. Okay, so you're just going to have this little dangly part. And then I'm going to do that with the next one. So again, I'm laying it on top. And I'll put this one in. And I put this one in. And I bring it down. Now don't worry about the gap yet. Now you're going to keep doing this all the way down. So again, I'm laying it on top. Then I put one through the center. And then I get the tail and I put that one through the center. Again, I'm not too worried about the length of my tails because this is going to be too long. I don't want them to be this long. I'll be trimming them up. I just want them to be longer than what I need for just in case. So let me do this whole row because sometimes since our loom is odd and even on one side, we have to do something different to the odd side, and I'll show you that in a second. So now I'm getting closer to the end of my loom. And as you can tell, I'm going to do this next one because I need that pair. And then this one doesn't have a pair. So I'm going to show you what's going to happen for that last warp thread. So just like before, I start on top. Then I get the tails and I bring them around to the middle. And I pull this little guy down, making sure my warp threads aren't too tight. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to include that last warp thread that I did on this one with this one. So I'm going to have this pair right there. And I know that's going to seem really odd, but you don't want to have this gap. You don't want to have this one bald spot actually. So I'm going to go around and through. And now I'm going to go, you can see that. So I'm around, I put it on top and I went to the middle. Now I'm going to get this one and bring it through. So now this side has some of that raya as well. So now this is the first row. So these are very loosely attached. You know, they're just kind of wrapped around that warp thread. And so I push them down as best I can. And as you can see, I have my thread coming from behind where I was doing my basket. And so now I'm going to begin again. Just like what we did before, I'm going to do that tabby. I'm sorry, not the basket. So I'm going to go. I went under this last one. So I'm going to go over under. I'm just going to do this tabby. Again, you want to do 2 rows. And what this tabby does is it locks those strings in place. So that way they're not going to be moving around when we do that next one. Now, depending on how thick your yarn is, when you use your beater to bring this down, I would also suggest that you use the same thread. Now, I'm using 2 different colors because I want you to see the tabby that I'm weaving and then my raya, that shag that I'm going to be creating. The reason why we do 2 rows is simply because it'll provide enough resistance to kind of hold those pieces together. If you wanted to try and just do a row of tabby, then more raya, another row of tabby, some more raya, then that's up to you. Also, what I like to do is, since there's this little bit of a gap I like to do the opposite. So I'm going to stop right here and just do one row of tabby. And kind of like what happened over here, you know, let's say we started on this side. Okay, well, so this one, I'm just going to do these two. So I start on top, and I put one tail through, and then the other tail through the center. Sometimes having nails is not a perk. I'll bring that down. And now I'm going to start just kind of doing the opposite, really, of the raya I did below. So as you can see, these are now kind of going to the opposite of what was just done below. And it's providing that filler. So that way you don't see those gaps in between those two. I'm just kind of going to that opposite direction. So that way it's nice and full. So see, that's already starting to look a little bit fuller. So I'm going to keep going and do the rest of these rows. Now, as you can imagine, when I get to this end, it's also going to be opposite, just like this last one underneath here. And I'll just do the same thing here. Now, raya is really only on one side of the bag, so you won't see any raya on the edges, unfortunately. So I have my bag example right here that I had done a while ago. And I have some raya here at the bottom. And so it's all on the sides, but really there's nothing on the edge. It's just really in the front and in the back. The key is just putting that tabby in the middle. So let me keep going and finish up this row. Now here I am again at the end. So I'm going to finish off with this pair, and then just like I did on this other end, I'm going to go ahead and include that one last one to make a pair. So here's my last pair. Start it over. Now I'm putting the tails through the center. Remember, you don't want your warp thread to get too tight. And so now I'm going to go over these last two, even though this is the odd one out. Go through the center. This one's going to go through the center. And so as you keep going layer by layer, and you keep just in between those guys putting in your tabby, you'll start to get this really nice, really full shag effect. So I'm going to keep going so that way I can show you what that looks like when you have a nice chunk of raya just hanging out on your board. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just do one layer in between. If your bag, like let's say you were gonna start raya and you were already doing tabby, you can start raya right away, unless you wanted it in a specific color. So like let's say I had this all yellow tabby and then I started my purple raya. That's fine. As I continue on, I want that tabby to be the same color, just that way you can't see in between it. So you can like kind of see that yellow kind of peeking out, and that's not what you want to do. I have it two different colors, so I want you to be able to see the tabby versus the raya versus the shag. So let me do a few more rows so you can see how this looks when it's really full. So what you're seeing now is I've done a few more layers of this raya to really kind of fill it out, really get that shaggy look to it. Um, and I was kind of messing around between 2 rows of tabby and 1 row of tabby. So let me zoom in just to show you that. But looking at it, you can't tell. So let's say you have a lot of yarn left over and you want to just keep going with the tabby and you're just going to start putting in some raya that's a different color. You can't really see that yellow through it. You can a little bit. There's a few like little tiny glimpses of that yellow underneath, but it's not too bad. I would change my yarn so that way my tabby and my raya matched, but that's because I'm OCD and I don't want anything to show. But let me show you the 1 layer of tabby versus 2 layer just very quickly. So as I showed you before, you have to put some tabby in between your layers of your raya, the little shag. Some videos, they'll show you about doing 2 layers of tabby before your raya, or doing just the 1 layer. And I wanted to kind of experiment since I kind of have you guys hostage, to see which one looked better. So right here, in between this little hair follicle area, right here I have 2 layers of tabby. And you see, because I have used my beater to really like push down to get these all nice and woven really well together, you can barely even tell that it's 2 layers. And then above, on these next ones, I just did 1 layer of tabby. So like if I separate piece 1, there's just 1 layer right there. And you really can't tell the difference between when I did my 2 layers and when I did my 1. So if you want to just do 1 layer of tabby and then more raya, and then do another layer of tabby and then more raya, that is perfectly fine. One thing I do want to caution you about is you have to have that tabby. So for instance, let's say this is perfect. I don't want any more raya. I love how the shag looks. It's just as much as I need in this spot. I want to stop. I still need to do 1 more layer of tabby. The reason why is these guys are very loose. You know, they're just kind of put in there. They're not really knotted or anything. And it's this tabby that like forces it to stay down. So when you're done, you still just need to do at least 1 layer of tabby at the top to finish, and then you'll be fine. And it looks really, really cool. One thing I want to open up to you guys as well is I was researching, because I'm going to have a lot of tabby in my project. As you can tell by my sketch, I'm going to be doing, I'm going to have a lot of raya. I'm going to have raya like all throughout my bag. And I was wondering about the length and, you know, when I cut these, how will this look? I don't want it to look too weird, but I like this kind of long, shaggy look. And I actually found a YouTube video of creating raya, this kind of shaggy look, but instead of having these long strands, it actually shows you how to make these little loops. So instead of these long little hairs, you have all of these little loops layered on top of each other. So I'm going to post that video alongside this video. You do not need to do that one, but I just want to give you guys some extra ideas for Raya. And this is how you do it.